Hello, welcome to the Frank Islam Show. I'm Frank Islam. We have with us today Gautam Adhikari, one of India's most renowned journalists. He edited the Times of India, the country's leading newspaper in the 1990s. Mr. Adhikari was also the founding editor of the newspaper Daily News and Analysis in the early 2000s. It is a privilege and honor. I'm humbled to have him as a part of our show. Welcome to the show. And we just chatted on our previous show about the U.S.-India relationship. We talked about where we're going and what's the future holds as far as the U.S.-India relationship goes. So please shed some light on that, if you may.
Okay, I think the last time we spoke, we talked about where this relationship was and how it started changing, particularly India's foreign policy started changing with the opening up of the economy in 1991. But the US-India relationship actually first went into a nosedive when India exploded its nuclear bombs in 98 as a test. There were 5 explosions that India carried out, and that was the rock bottom in a way in the US-India relationship at that point of time. But then things started changing. Things started changing with President Clinton's visit in early 2000. And you might remember that Clinton spent 5 days in India, traveling all over.
He was warmly welcome.
Yes, and he spent only 5 hours in Pakistan, and that was shown up in a big way because Pakistan has been an ally, still is officially, of the United States. Whereas India and the United States have not only not been allies, they were not even partners as they are supposed to be today. So that was really the breakthrough that was achieved. But the real change, the qualitative change came
under
about
George W. Bush.
Under George W. Bush and Condoleezza Rice, I must say, she played a big role because I think she also wanted the India relationship to develop in a big way at that time. And by achieving this civilian nuclear deal, I think it set aside a lot of fears in the Indian foreign policy community that although India is a nuclear power, it is not a part of the nuclear club, as they said, which has the bomb, and yet, despite being a part of the non-proliferation treaty, is not ostracized, because they all tested and became nuclear powers before the non-proliferation treaty was actually signed in '68. So India actually got around, or rather the US assisted India in getting around that India became a de facto member of the nuclear club, and which is now 6 countries if you include India. Pakistan also tested after that, but Pakistan has not been given the same facilities so far, nor has North Korea. So these are also 2 powers with nuclear weapons. But India, that was a big breakthrough, and the foreign policy community was very impressed and thought that this
and Indian American played a very significant role in accomplishing that mission.
They played a crucial role at the increasing clout of Indian Americans such as yourself and others, who also not only have been successful and have become rich in this country,
but they're part of the political process.
Exactly.
They have a seat on the table.
I mean, many of them are supporters of various political parties, one of the 2 political parties. Majority are with the Democratic Party, at least if you go by Mr. Obama's election, it shows that 73% of Asians, but with Indians, I think the figure is even slightly higher than that.
I would tend to agree that is a true statement.
That Indians tend to vote Democratic, but there are important contributors to the Republican Party.
So where it is headed, Gautam, as far as you see the U.S.-India relationship under the Obama administrations, where it is headed in terms of the trade, investment, bilateral trade relationship as well as the commerce, where it is headed as far as the U.S.-India relationship is concerned?
I think as far as the economic side goes, it is headed in the right direction.
It is headed in the right direction.
That trade is now
I believe it's 28 billion or...
No, it's
more than that?
Way above that.
Yeah. It's still a lot lower than I'd like to see.
Yeah, but I think the trade is 100 billion. If
100 billion?
Trade, that is export and import combined. It's, I mean, the overall trade between the two countries, which is amazing.
Was significantly larger and bigger than what it has been in the past.
Yeah, and then major US companies have offices in
Yes.
India. General Electric, for instance, which is Stamford based. I once went there to give a talk, and I discovered that they have more employees in India than in the United States.
Wow.
Well, that is not always a happy thing for them in the India or in the American political system, because people say, "Oh, you're shipping jobs overseas," but that's a separate issue.
So I hope our relationship is based on shared interest and mutual interest and shared goals.
It's the shared goals are given.
Yes.
In the sense that both are democracies, the largest and the second
No
largest.
question.
Both basically subscribe to the same value systems in terms of overall moral values as well as democratic values. And after all, the Indian Constitution was based on a number of constitutions around the world, but it took heavily from the US Constitution, particularly freedom of expression.
And freedom of religion.
And freedom of religion. These are things that
And freedom of press.
Ambedkar,
who wrote
actually wrote most of it. He was, in a way, the father of the Indian Constitution, along with some other fathers also. But he studied in Columbia University.
Is that right? I did
Yes,
not know that.
He studied in Columbia University, and
I would
so
like
he
to-
was well informed about the U.S.
No
system.
question about that. And thank you. We should all thank him for his leadership, what he did.
Yes, indeed.
And
he was a
I
Dalit.
understand he was a lower caste.
The lowest possible.
The lowest possible.
The untouchable caste. He
Yeah.
was from that, and he was extraordinary. So, I mean, the shared values, yes, there's no problem. Shared goals, also there's no problem. So it's the short-term interests that are sometimes a problem. And at this point of time, not so much in the economic side, but sometimes in the strategic side.
Okay.
And a lot depends there on what happens in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
And also Iran. Well, talk about Pakistan. I wanted to have you shed some light about the relationship between India and Pakistan. It is the interest of India that the Pakistan remains safe, secure, and democratic.
You have said it. That's exactly what...
And they have a shared heritage for thousands of years. They need to live in peace and harmony. It's a great... They should be able to mature the relationship. They should be able to have a trade, commerce, investment. So shed some light where it is headed, where it has been, where is it going.
The Pakistan-India relationship was extremely contentious, and has been extremely contentious for almost over 60 years now. Of course, much of it is based on the Kashmir issue. But it's really not the Kashmir issue. It's how the country was partitioned and the turmoil that the subcontinent went through when Pakistan and India were created as separate nations. So this is something that has roots in history, roots in culture. There are lots of while there is a lot that is common, the creation of the two nation states seem to emphasize that they are different.
No, they're not.
In fact, they're not. They love the same kind of music. They love the same kind of food.
Well, they drink the water from the same well, from the same river. They cherish their children's future.
Absolutely. The Urdu language, which is the official language of Pakistan, came up from Western UP, or actually from Delhi. It was an invention in India.
You're right.
It was a language that didn't exist
And
until...
Ghalib prospered that language in 1852.
And even before that, I think it was during Akbar's time.
Yeah, you're
That
absolutely
Urdu
right.
became official as the language. It was Persian before that, but Akbar made it...
And Turkish.
Well, I think the official language in court was Persian, but because they are of Turkish origin, in the sense that they came from Turkmenistan.
Yeah.
So I think they spoke Turkish as well. But they were actually, the official language was Persian in the courts. But he made it Urdu. Urdu literally means camp.
And Urdu is a Turkish word.
I don't know that.
It means encampment, just like
yeah,
you said.
camp,
There are a lot of Turkish words that have been derived in Urdu, Begum, Khanam, Khan.
Yeah, oh, yes, a lot.
They're all from Turkish language. I had an opportunity to read it not too long ago. And I would like to continue that discussions about a little bit about the media relationship and media in a minute. We're going to take a break. We'll come back in a minute. Thank you very much for our conversations, Gautam. Let's continue our discussion that we had before the break about the India-Pakistan relationship and talk about the future generations and how they're going to work together.
Well, the thing is that Pakistan, like India, is going through a lot of changes. And there are more young people in India than older people. And there are more young people in Pakistan than there are older people. Now, there's a lot of interest, at least amongst the educated young Pakistani, in forgetting the past and getting on. And they see India across the border doing relatively better.
No question.
And they would like, and crucially, there is another community. Your own community, the business community.
Yes.
You are maybe an American, but in India and Pakistan, the business communities on both sides, they are very eager on trade. Now Pakistan has granted, after a long time, it's granted the most favored nation status to India, but there are too many qualifications in that as well. But nevertheless, trade,
that's the first step.
Official trade is growing. And official trade, I hope, will grow even further. When I was in India, I used to travel between Delhi and Bombay, and quite often on the plane, I would be sitting next to a Pakistani businessman.
Wow.
So, I mean, they would say very clearly that they want better relations. They want to go beyond Kashmir. They want to go beyond the India-Pakistan hostility. And whether we come from the same stock or not is almost secondary.
Yeah,
For them, it is, look.
So you really do see the brighter horizon.
I see, except for one disturbing factor, which is the structure of the Pakistani political system, which is so dominated by the military.
Yeah, true.
Now, I think Indians have become very pragmatic on this score, and by and large, the Indian political leaders, whoever is in power, they are ready to deal with the military, because I think they understand that in Pakistan, the military will be in charge. Whether there is a democratic government in power or not, the real power will be the military for the foreseeable future. And I think it's in the interest of India in a big way, increasingly so, and in the interest of the United States, to see a stable, united Pakistan. If Pakistan spins out of control, it's bad not only for India and the neighborhood, it's a devastation for the world.
You said it very well. Let's shift our gear to talk about the role of the Indian media that has changed quite a bit in the last 20, 25 years. Do you think that the Indian media has become too hostile, too radical, and too much activist?
Well, I would say that you have to divide the Indian media up between the press and the visual and broadcast media. As far as the printed medium goes, that has also changed. Newspapers are very different. They're much more market oriented than they were at one time. Some of them have gone sort of down market to capture more of the rising readership, because this is inevitable, that when there are younger people looking at their prospects, they would like to read a newspaper which serves their interest, rather than old people like myself who would rather talk about the world and foreign policy. So there's a lot of entertainment-based print journalism that's going on. But in India, the great thing at the moment is it's one of the very few countries in the world, I think perhaps the only major country, where the print medium is still expanding. And newspapers are actually making profits. And the Hindi language newspapers are expanding much faster than the English language newspapers. And the largest newspapers in India now are Hindi language newspapers.
Is that right?
Yes, Dainik Jagran and the Dainik Bhaskar.
Okay.
And then if you go to Kerala, the newspapers there are doing very well. In West Bengal, the papers are doing very well. All the language newspapers are doing extremely well.
You're talking about regional languages.
Regional languages. Well, in India we call it language, but you're right. That's what we mean by regional language newspapers. But even the English language press, especially my own group, the Times of India, they're making enormous profits and doing very well. Not all English language newspapers. English language readership is not growing as fast as it used to.
Is it because the young generations are not grasping in terms of the understanding of the English language?
Exactly. No, not necessarily. Actually, there is more fluency in the English language now than there was. It's more widespread. But I guess the depth and the patience required to read long articles and talk about serious issues has changed a bit. So people derive a lot of their information from television. and from the new media,
Or from internet.
from the internet.
Oh,
So
okay.
those who are educated, but those who are less educated, for them television has become the most important medium.
That's the source of information for
Yes,
them.
and television in India is strange because a lot of it is entertainment. So people generally watch entertainment, Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi and that kind of stuff,
Right.
which actually promote, I think, the wrong kinds of values, but that's a different issue. What happens is that there are also, at last count, before I left the country in 2009, there were 69 24-hour news channels in various languages. I think now it's gone well over 100. I don't know what the figure is, frankly. Now, these channels are spending less on actual collection of information. They are relying on the print medium and PTI to get their basic information. But they're relying, like Fox News here, more on these talk shows and chat shows where people argue, and because they're cheaper to produce.
That's exactly
and they get relatively high viewership.
right.
So there, to get back to your question, yes, there's a lot of activism going on out there. Some of it is good. Mobilization against corruption, for instance. Mobilization against rape. I mean, the television has played a good role in mobilizing.
And so is the internet, so is the Facebook,
So is
the
Twitter.
media,
So
so
is
the social media
Twitter.
has played an important
Yeah,
role.
very much. But at the same time, television is a very powerful medium right now in India. Not all of it is necessarily good activism, but a lot of it is jingoistic nationalism.
That's the best way to describe it.
But you can also have the other kind.
You have lived in this country for a long, long time. I have two questions to ask you. Number one is, what role Indian Americans are playing in terms of maturing or maintaining the relationship with U.S.-India? And also, you know, this is a different America, not the Reagan's America that used to be shining city upon a hill. It's the America that's a little bit different, more diverse. And we have a president of the United States who's African American. Shed some light on this.
Well, the big change is demographic, of course, in this country.
The diversity.
Yeah, and the other change is the changes that are going on in the rest of the world. So the completely dominant position that America acquired, not so much during Reagan's time, but immediately after, because the Cold War ended, and it was called a unipolar world. There was only one major power in the world.
Superpower, right.
Soviet Union collapsed, Russia was struggling,
Right.
China hadn't come up to the level that it was. But from that point onward, the world has changed a lot. It's in the last, let's say, 20 years. There have been a lot of different powers that have grown. And America's clear dominance internationally is not as much as it used to be. America has to, it can't sort of impose its will as it wishes and proceed unilaterally. And when it has proceeded unilaterally, for instance in the last Iraq war, it has created a mess.
It did.
So,
And Afghanistan.
And Afghanistan is a more complicated issue because there is always the Pakistan factor involved in it. So Afghanistan, I don't know how, what will happen after the US withdraws in 2014. But nevertheless, it's a different world. But internally, America has changed fundamentally. It's no longer a male-dominated, white Christian society. It is the most exciting, diverse immigrants community that you can. It has always been an immigrant society, but
Well,
much of the migration in the early days used to be from other white countries.
European.
Mind you, even then there was discrimination.
Yes.
You speak to the Irish, you speak to the Jewish, you speak to the Polish. My God, they faced much worse
they confer hostility and a prejudice.
They faced much worse than we did.
Yeah, exactly.
As Indians when we started migrating seriously from 1965 onwards when the Immigration Act was changed, and by which time, America was actively fighting racism from the top. And that change has now led to America electing an African American president not once, but twice, with clear majorities. Both times, Mr. Obama has secured more than 50% of the vote.
That's the popular vote.
Of the popular vote.
And his electoral votes was a lot higher than the Mr. Romney.
Absolutely, but I'm just talking about even the popular
popular
vote.
votes.
And that is astounding.
It is astounding.
Yeah. So, you know, when you look back at that and you think that the phenomenal changes that have taken place between 2008 and 2012, the two elections that took place, you really sit back and wonder, maybe this is the model for the whole world. America has been a model for the rest of the world in many ways.
We've always been a source of inspiration to all.
But when you see what's happening now, of course there's a reaction. Of course many people don't like it.
Yes.
Of course there are people who say that, you know, we want to take back our America. But then you can jolly well shoot back and say that, look, 51% of the people also say this is our America. Now that's a huge change.
Very well said. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for calling me.
We
It's been a real
thoroughly
pleasure.
enjoyed our conversations. And thank you for watching. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week.